Erstklassisch mit Mischke, der musikalische Podcast des Hamburger Abendblatts.
Schönen guten Tag zu einer neuen Folge. Ich bin, wie man das vielleicht hört, in der Elbphilharmonie. An der Akustik kann man es erkennen, aber nicht im Backstage-Bereich, sondern im Hotel. Ich habe heute einen Gast, der hier in Hamburg zwar schon mal war, aber noch nicht in der Elbphilharmonie, und ein Dirigent, der bislang hier noch nicht so bekannt ist, aber das kann sich ja gerne ändern, hier in Hamburg erst recht. Das ist ein Amerikaner aus Texas, Robert Trevino oder Trevino, I have no idea. Und wir machen das Ganze auf Englisch, aber ich glaube, das wird kein Problem sein. Ich freue mich erstmal, dass das geklappt hat. Er ist heute hier in Hamburg, um heute Abend nach unserem Gespräch ein Konzert mit dem Rai-Orchester zu machen, mit Hilary Hahn als Solistin, und es gibt das Sibelius-Konzert und Mussorgsky will ja eine Ausstellung. Aber wir haben jetzt erstmal eine Menge zu besprechen. So, thank you very much, Robert Trevino or Trevino. I have no, what do you prefer?
Well, that's whatever one you want.
Okay.
Actually, my name is technically Trevino with the Inye over the N. But when my family immigrated to America, they got rid of the Inye because it was complicated and people didn't know what to do with it. So it became Trevino. And then when I came into being an adult, I learned that my name had that. And in an interest in trying to recuperate some of my cultural identity, I re-added it back in.
Okay.
And depending on where I'm at and whether people are comfortable pronouncing it or not but it's fine for me. I'm just Robert. So.
Okay. Hi, Robert. So thanks very much for having me. And we're always starting here with your choice of taking a first question being an easy one or a hard one. Which one would you prefer?
Hard question.
Hard question. Okay. You said so. Was life good to you so far?
Life has been very good to me in many ways. It's been very hard for me. I'm always careful about saying how hard my life has been because I'm quite aware of how much more difficult life can be for other people. So I'm not one, you probably have noticed when you read about me or have checked my biography, I don't really ring the difficulty bell too much in my life. And that's just simply because I have overcome a lot of things, and I recognize other people have a much more difficult time than me in a difficult history or even a current moment. But I live a life that I've chosen.
Okay.
And that's pretty special.
Just to explain, you're from Texas, you're from Mexican descent, you're sort of a self-made conductor, self-made musician, and you're sort of the hardest working man in classical show business somehow. And I found a quote that's very typical, I thought, for you, since although we've never met before, but if the quote is true, you've said once, "Don't tell me what I can or what I can't do." And you've grown up in Fort Worth, in the middle of smack in the middle of Texas, the Lone Star State, and you had an unusual childhood, so to say. Would you like to explain, or shall I?
Unusual childhood. I think everybody would say that their childhood is unusual. You know, when people go over to somebody else's house and they meet their parents, they always come out going, goodness, that family's weird. There's no family on the planet that is not weird. And everybody who goes into they're the unique dynamics. But it's true. I don't come from money. You know, I come from a very, very poor family. Not homelessly poor, but certainly not living in a very good neighborhood. My great-grandmother couldn't read or write. My grandmother only got up to the 3rd grade, one of my grandmothers. My father was 18 when I was born, my mother 17. They both barely finished high school. My family were poor farmers from before that time, illiterate and just living from the land. My grandfather, who's still alive today, grew up traveling through Texas and New Mexico and California with his father and his mother picking cotton or grapes or whatever was in the season. And he went off to the military during the Vietnam War and then came back and started a family and was able to have a normal job. But so that's kind of my history. And my parents when I came into being, I was a complete accident. They weren't planning to have a kid. That sort of thing doesn't happen in my family planning when it comes to that. And they took as many jobs as they could. My father worked at a pizza delivery company, then worked on cleaning restaurants, and then was a cook in another place. So he was working 3 jobs for us to live in a sort of nice neighborhood. But we lived in the worst part of that nice neighborhood, on the intersection of 2 main streets across from the gas station. I mean, it's nobody wanted to live in that house because it was just a terrible location. But that allowed me, because in the United States, where you live depends on what school you go to. So it's very much tied to the economics of your upbringing. So if you don't have a lot of money, you're in a poor neighborhood, you go to the poor schools. You go to a better neighborhood, you have better schools. So it's not as sort of equalized as it is here in Europe. So they moved there just so that I would have the opportunity to have a decent education. Of course, we couldn't even turn on the electricity in our house when I was growing up because they couldn't afford it. We had an ice box that we would keep our food in. But I don't say this with the sort of trying to make people feel sorry for me. Actually, I'm very proud of my background. And in fact, actually, I would even say that I don't even see those as hard times. Actually, as a kid, that's just what life was.
I found this story that's been mentioned several times about you being in your dad's pickup, and he's changing the radio stations, and all of a sudden there's Mozart coming on, Mozart Requiem. You saw it and said, "This is for me, classical music. This is what I'm going to be in." And then the next step was you listening to Prokofiev, Peter and the Wolf.
Yeah.
Peter and the Wolf. And
you're really good at your research.
Yeah, sorry. And you heard the bassoon part and you thought, that's the instrument I want to play. And playing bassoon is not the sexiest thing you can do, even in Texas, I guess.
Well, one musician told me once that when you're a little kid and you're playing the cello, it's a little bit like looking at a wounded gazelle in the Serengeti. All the animals are wanting to attack you. But being a little tiny runt like I was and having a monstrous bassoon case with me, I was no less disadvantaged. It was surely not my opening act with trying to get a girl to go on a date with me. It was, in fact, probably a repellent for the most part.
Mm. And then you were pretty good at it?
No, I wasn't very good at it.
You wasn't? Okay.
No, I was terrible.
Really?
I was very terrible from the beginning. This is something I don't actually tell this story very often, but if you want to hear it.
Sure.
When I got the instrument, so I walked in on the first day of school, it was August, and they have this sort of, it's called the electives fair. So you have to go in and you say, oh, I want to be in the choir, football, you get to pick this element. And I walked straight to the band room and I knew exactly what I wanted. I walked into the teacher there, Melody Ann Mallow is her name, and it was McGahee before, and I said, hi, I'm Robert Trevino, I would like to play the bassoon. Which is not the most common thing for a person to walk into a band room out the back. So, of course, instantly, first impressions matter a lot. She thought it was probably strange. So she looked at my lips and said, no, you have some good lips. You should maybe think about trombone. No, it's bassoon or nothing. Okay, well, will you at least consider playing on a trombone for a moment just to see if it works? I said, sure, no problem. I'm always open to anything. So she gives me the trombone. I go make a few notes on it. And I said, great, are you happy? Now give me the bassoon. So, I mean, of course, nobody wants to play the bassoon, so they were very happy for me to play the bassoon. So I had the instrument, and I thought, well, now I have the instrument. And I love music so much, surely I'm good at it. Surely, I mean, like Mozart, he just automatically becomes great. I mean, I don't know how it happens because, of course, I don't come from a musical background. So I have no idea that you should practice this much, you should get lessons, you should do these things. I didn't have any guidance like that. So I thought, well, now I have the instrument in my hand. Now magic should start happening. So I start playing, and I'm hearing what was inevitably the sound of a cow dying, and I thought, well, now this is quite good. I mean, this must be really the top. And then the end of that first year came, and I was quite happy. I thought I had done some good things. I learned what the teacher told me, more or less, and we did the audition at the end of the year for the placement for the second year, and I was last place. and it was devastating. And I won't forget this now as an adult, a very lovely woman, but as a kid was a bit hard to me, Libby Zachariah, now I think a doctor with kids and such. She said to me, "Oh, Trevino, you're never going to amount to anything." Because she was the first place. She was like best in the school, educated, I mean, very, very high achieving person, even to this day. And I went home and I cried, and I cried, and I thought, what is this? What has happened here? How can I be the last place when I love music more than anything? I know I love music more than all these other kids. I know it. I live and breathe for it. I dream about it. And then I realized, oh, this isn't going to come easy. I'm going to have to work my ass off. Mm-hmm. And that was it. I wiped my tears, and I got up the next day, and I went, and from that day forward until about I was 25 or 23, I'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd go for a run, I'd go and I'd practice until 8 before my first class. I would go until 11 or 12, whatever the class was done. The lunch break of 45 minutes, I would eat my sandwich on the way to the band hall and cram in another 30 minutes of practice, get back to the classes, go to my band classes, finish the day, practice until my teacher was going home, which was probably around 7 or so. Then I'd go home, and then I'd take care of my brother and sister, do my homework, clean the house, eat dinner, and then I'd practice again until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd go to sleep for the 2 hours. And I repeated that every day until, well, around 23 or 25, somewhere in there, it started changing.
That's gruesome in a way.
Yes, but because you won't ever find me talking about me being a talented person. You won't hear that. My wife gets really pissed at me when she hears me say that. She goes, "You're amazingly talented," but I don't want to be defined by that. I would rather be defined by my work, my dedication, what I'm in control of. I'm not in control over whatever talent or lack of talent I have, but I am in control of what I can do with what I have, and I can develop that.
When I read about your biography, I always had this picture in my mind of Rocky Balboa running up the stairs in Philadelphia, beating meat and just striving to get to the top.
It's true. I remember an old manager of mine, he used to say, and my conducting has changed over the last 6 or 7 years. He used to say one of the things that allowed me to have a career at the very beginning of when I started making some of my debuts, was he said that one had the feeling watching me conduct that I was fighting for my life. And I think that was a really fair comment. And when I look back and I see those performances, if I have a video or I watch what I did, yeah, I was fighting for my life. And fortunately the musicians were patient with that, but also it was exciting probably for them to a certain extent as well. But I'm less like that now.
But somehow the bassoon wasn't as sexy as when you started playing it and you changed your mind to becoming a conductor. And then there's this story about you picking the score of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring.
Yeah.
Is that somehow true? Just picking a score, and all of a sudden it's Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and there's hardly anything that's more complicated to conduct.
Yeah, so the story, a little out of order. So when I was 8, I heard the Mozart, and then I was in my music class, and I heard Peter and the Wolf. But then shortly after that, I was watching television, PBS, which is public broadcasting station in the United States, and there was a performance of Seiji Ozawa. And I saw the conductor, and I said, "No, that's really what I want to do." So I didn't know how all this would work out. So when I started playing bassoon, that was the first thing available to me. Then the year after that, the private teacher who worked in my school, Charles Hall, who's like a second father to me. I mean, I'm still very close with him. I went to him that summer before when I was told I wouldn't amount to anything. I spent the whole summer working, doing gardening, whatever I could get my money for. Because my parents, I asked them for private lessons. And they said, well, when you get good, you can have private lessons. It doesn't really work that way. But they didn't know any better, and I don't fault them for that. So I took the money, I gave it to my mother, and I said, please write a check, and I will go to Mr. Hall and hand him the check like you paid for it. And he gave me my lessons. I was paying like $12 for a 30-minute lesson or so. And he'd give me what I needed to prepare that week. And he would come twice a week, so he was dealing with other students, but he'd see me in the practice room, and he'd go, so how are all the etudes coming? And I'd say, oh, I already learned them. Yeah, and it goes, no, you didn't. I said, yeah, I can. And I go play them straight through for him, right? He goes, okay, then work on etude number 16 and 18 and 12, whatever. So all of a sudden, then he started coming, and he'd started making more time to see me twice a week, because I would just consume what he offered. And then he found out I was paying for the lessons myself. And then he said, look, I'm not, and this is part of the story of my success, or where I'm at now. This is the most important part, perhaps, is that he said, that's not okay. I'm going to take care of it. I will teach you for free, but don't disappoint me. Well, that was for him. That was the same for David Zinman. That was the same for Michael Tilson Thomas. That was the same for Kurt Mazur, David McGill, Cliff Colnott, Leif Segerstam. I go through the list. So
you have so much pressure building up, all these people saying, don't disappoint me. That's awful in a way.
It never worried me.
Okay.
Because the only person I was ever worried about disappointing was myself, which I was quite comfortable, which I was quite used to doing. My expectations for myself far exceed what anyone else's for me. Yeah.
And then you started getting your hands on conducting.
Yeah, so great luck, actually. Charles, my bassoon teacher, he had started his master's degree in conducting. So I had told him in the course of one of my lessons that I wanted to be a conductor. And he said, well, do you know anything about it? And I said, no. And so he started explaining some things to me. He invited me to his house. I came to his house and was having a lesson. And he said, well, why don't we get you your first score? Why don't we take a look at something? What do you want to look at? So I look at his score cabinet, which wasn't very big. It's like maybe like 20 pieces, like a Haydn Symphony Mozart, which Mozart has always been like closest to my heart. And so I look at the score, I go, okay, and I look at this thing, Stravinsky, because it was a Boozy and Hawk score with a W. And it's a mini score, so I pull it down, and I open the first page. I mean, it's a time signature I've never seen in my life. It's bassoon and tenor clef, which I had never seen like that. I mean, I see Cyrillic, which I didn't know what that was at the time. I mean, everything was truly hieroglyphics. It was like me trying to look at Mandarin, you know, and I thought, I don't understand a damn thing that's here. And I said, well, this is the one then, because I don't understand any of it. This is where I have to start.
So that's the best start in a way for you, because it's been such a big mountain to get on, such a big task for you. So the bigger the task, the better.
Yeah.
It would have been worse if it's been easier.
I think so. I still have that score, by the way. It'll be this score for my first score, and I just moved all my things from the United States to my new home in Spain, and I was unpacking them, and my student was there because I was going to have a lesson, and I was going to teach my student, and I said, oh, I'm almost done unpacking, and I pulled open this box, and I had the Stravinsky scores, and I then showed it to her. And I said, look, this is the very first score I ever bought. It was Stravinsky Rite of Spring. And I have like 5 of them now, but it was the very first one with my highlighter and all my horrible ink. I would always write in my score in ink back then because I was sure everything I wrote was going to be forever. I don't write anything like that now.
What was the first concert? What was the first piece you conducted where you were actually feeling that you were conducting and not just trying to survive?
Wow, that's a hard one. I don't know if I can actually say that it's ever really happened for me. I'm not worried that it won't work. I'm always sure it will. And even in recent times, I'm working with really fine orchestras, very, very capable musicians. I rehearse well, so things go usually well in the concert. But feeling completely free, like there's no worry. Goodness, I don't even know if worry is even the right word. That I am just carefree. You know, one of my favorite artists is B.B. King. I love watching him. Sits there with his guitar, and he's got his eyes closed, and he is just wailing on that bad boy, and he's singing. And it's very clear that the music is just coming straight from inside of him and out. And there's just a innate flow from the divine through him and out. I am jealous of that. I'm envious of that. I try to seek that in my work, but I'm not B.B. King. I don't, and I also, that's also not my work also. I mean, he was writing his own things, he was producing his own music. His art form permits for that. My art form, my first and foremost criteria is to accomplish something for the composer. They're the ones who are generating the inspiration. So I don't really allow myself that complete flying in the clouds, because I'm thinking, well, Mahler has written this here. Now I need to make sure I get this, because this is what I think he or she meant in this moment. I have moments where I'm flying and I don't really know what's going on, whether it was when I did my Don Carlo in Bolshoi, or I remember there were a couple moments, Munich Phil, when I was doing Mahler 5, that was really special. There have been many special moments, but never a full performance where I was in the clouds. I come out afterwards, I'm very happy with the concert, excited, thrilled.
So you're never really satisfied and happy, but some evenings are not as terrible as others.
Yeah, and I should be very clear in saying it's not my feelings towards the other people, it's just myself.
So you always blame yourself then?
Well, sometimes it is other people's fault. I mean, I can't put that key down on the bassoon, and I can't put that finger down on the violin, and somebody reads the wrong, they change the line, whatever. But no, I don't actually even put it all on myself either. I just recognize that I used to be a perfectionist when I was really, really young. I mean, I remember I had a big panic attack. I had a nervous breakdown when I was around 15. Because I was getting ready to do a concert with my youth orchestra, and I was playing Rossini, The Barber of Seville, Copland Appalachian Spring, and the Pavane by Fauré, and I was playing first bassoon. It has all these big solos, and I was just so unhappy with the intonation on this note, on that note, and I was just working and working to get every all those rhythms really perfect, and I worked myself into a blunder, and I got to the performance and I couldn't breathe, I couldn't see, I was hyperventilating. I still played, I still got through it, and I heard the recording afterwards, everything was fine, everything was in good place. But I realized that that's not the right path, very obviously not the right path. So I had to do some immediate reevaluation on my, first off, what I think is the biggest problem I have, and probably the biggest problem that most people have, that I've come to realize: yourself. The world is difficult, your engagement with other people. Barring somebody trying to shoot you and kill you, most of the problems in our lives are self-generated in some way or another. And for sure, our response to events. So I found myself becoming more of a stoic, that's saying, well, this is how it is, this is the situation. Now, what is it that I can do with what I have to make this thing better, or myself better? And recognizing my own prejudices or my own limitations or judgments, that's another one. And so I am a perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect, but I have started with more time realizing that doesn't actually exist.
Mm-hmm. And after all these interesting coincidences and chances and all these things happening in your youth, then you become sort of the last-minute replacement guy. You were the one to fill in for so many occasions when someone else got sick and on very short notice, and you came in and saved the day or saved the evening. And how is this thrill for you, being the one that is supposed to save everything? I mean, this just works your way then. If you have this pressure you put yourself on, and then you're the one not only to do a regular concert, but even more so, you have to be the one to save everything on short notice, and everybody's looking at you, and you are the one jumping in like Clark Kent and saving everything. Maybe are you even better than the rest of all the other ones because of your personal history in such a situation? I have no idea, but I found it fascinating that you seem to attract these chances or occasions where you have the chance to be the one replacing someone else and raising your finger and saying, you may think that he was good, but I'm even better. And I'll show you, and I'll show you in this situation.
I never ever really did that.
Okay.
First off, I hate competitions. I participated in a few of them as a conductor, and I dislike them profoundly. And especially in conducting, I think it's a bit rubbish, to be frank, because let's say you take two conductors back to back, and the orchestra hasn't even played the opening of Rite of Spring. The first conductor is inevitably going to have to sort some things out with the orchestra. The second one can go out there and dance around on the podium a bit more. And in the end, it is really very little to do with the person on the podium. You want to have a real conductors competition, make those people rehearse equitably difficult pieces from start to finish and watch them. Then you'll know what's what. Yeah, but that's not great for competition. But my father always used to say something, and I think it has served me very well. He said that opportunity is when preparation. What do they say? What preparation meets opportunity. That's what matters. It's not about. So what the backstory to all those replacements? There's two backstories to each one of them. One, let's say it was. I'm thinking of one right now. Santa Cecilia, for example, when I stepped in for Ja van Zweden once. Brahms' First Symphony. I had never conducted it before. But I had been studying it for about 18 years already. So, when I was 23 already, you could come into my room, which was nothing but books, and you would see all the Schubert symphonies, Schumann and Beethoven and blah, 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 blah. And I was constantly studying. I'd have a pile of scores because I always knew that I wouldn't be the one who would just, the carpet would roll out for, and they'd say, okay, in 1 year you come and do Mahler 5. In 2 years you come and do Strauss Heldenleben. No, I knew I'm not the desirable one. So I'm going to be the one who's called last. And that means I have to be ready. So repertoire that was important to step in on, I had already prepared it. So one perfect example of this was Schubert Unfinished Symphony. The first time I conducted it was with Orchestra Radio France. And it was on a substitution. Daniele Gatti got sick. He was supposed to do Bruckner 8th Symphony. I had just landed in Fort Worth to go and see my family. I was wearing a pair of shorts, tennis shoes, and I had a backpack. I was just going to go hang out with my family for a few days. I had a week off. I land from Detroit, from Ann Arbor, where I was living. I landed in Texas. My phone goes off the hook. My agent says, hey, you need to be in Paris like now. And I said, well, that's great. I'd love to go to Paris. But first off, I'm in Texas. I'm wearing shorts, and I don't have a passport. It's back in Detroit. What's going on? Orchestra Radio France, Gatti has gotten sick. He needs a replacement, and they want you to come and replace him. So what do they want? Bruckner 8? Oh, it's no problem. It would have been my first time conducting it, but I had it already prepared. And he said, no, they don't want to do that one. I already told them that you would be okay with 4 or 7. And I said, yeah, that's fine. I'd done both of them. And he said, yeah, okay. They said Bruckner 4. And I said, fine, no problem. Let me just get out of the plane. Let me get my ticket to go back to Detroit. Find me a flight going from Detroit to Paris today. So I said, but now that Bruckner 8 is a one symphony piece, one piece program, Bruckner 4 is not. So what is the rest of the program? Yeah, they don't know. And he said, can you just text me a list of possible pieces? I said, sure, no problem. It's like 25 pieces. Beethoven Symphony, this, that, Schubert, this, whatever. I'm on the plane going back to Detroit. I land. I said, so what's the decision? They said they don't have a decision yet. But they ask you just to go on ahead and just get on the plane. They'll have a solution and a decision whenever you land. I'd given them a list of things that I knew already and had done. So I was quite, okay, fine. Whatever, I'll manage it. So I land in Paris. I get into Paris. I am getting out of the car. I'm going straight to Radio France's hall. The orchestra didn't even realize Gatti had been changed out yet, because all of a sudden they get to the Bruckner 8 orchestra arrives, and they have Bruckner 4 on the stands, and they're looking at me, and they're like, you're not Daniele Gatti. So I said, by the way, what's the first half? We still haven't decided. Okay, into the first rehearsal comes. They said, we're going to do Schubert 5. I said, oh, that's great. That's lovely. I'm very happy for that. That will be no problem. So I called my wife and I said, hey, can you just go back to the FedEx and go and scan my score and send it to me? Yeah, fine. So she's about an hour later, I get a phone call from the director of the orchestra, and he says, sorry, we can't do Schubert 5. Pavel Jarvi's doing it with Orchestra de Paris in 3 months. So, okay, so which one do you want? Okay, Schubert 4. Sure, no problem, I've done that one too. So I call my wife back up, hey, X-nay on the 5 stay, go back and get the 4. No, get a phone call an hour later. Miko Frank is doing that one with, and so it goes on like this. I'm at the day before, the day before the general rehearsal, and it still hasn't been decided. So I arrive in the morning, and I'm doing Bruckner 4 again, and I then get pulled off to the side at the break, and the director says, we've decided, final decision, Schubert Unfinished Symphony. Do you know what symphony was not on my list?
I have a guess.
This one. And I said, I gave you a list of 25 pieces, and you've chosen the one not on the list. I'm sorry, but what are you doing? What do you expect from me to? Anyways, a lot of conversations, and I just told them I don't really like the piece. I've never done it. I'm very nervous about doing this. But I said, if the orchestra feels quite sure of it, and this is what they want, and they feel like that they can kind of carry me through this, fine. I'll be there, and I won't make a problem. So I asked Julia, she goes to the FedEx, she sends me my score. It's completely marked up. I mean, completely. Bowings and everything. Because I spent always every year, because I didn't like the Unfinished Symphony, and I thought that there was something wrong with me, because it's supposedly a masterpiece. So I said, well, it's a masterpiece, and there's something wrong with my approach. So it's me who has to change. So every year I would spend twice a year, like a week, always studying it again and again to see if I could find my way through the piece. And that night, all of a sudden I fell in love with it. Perhaps the stress of the moment, knowing I had to do it, knowing I was going to do it, and it was perfectly fine. I did the rehearsal that morning, and I really got into it. I had a fully formed kind of interpretation of it already. I just wasn't convinced of it yet. So that's an example, but it's preparation and opportunity. So I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't been prepared. And I have said no to other things. Somebody says, can you come here tomorrow and do Messiaen Chronochromie? No, I can't. That's not prepared. It's prepared now. So if somebody needs me to do Chronochromie tomorrow, I probably could do it. So.
But this sounds like you have a library of hundreds of pieces prepared already for every possible occasion and every possible call you might get in 10 minutes.
I didn't prepare them because of that. I prepared them because I love music and because I'm so curious. So right now I'm working on Martinu symphonies. Right, 4 years ago I started working on Elgar symphonies and Elgar works. So I've now gone through a lot of those, and I try to always be developing my repertoire. Working on right now, I have an entire stack of 15 pieces by Magnus Lindberg that I want to learn. So just because I like learning, and the more I know, the more I have other music in context, more inspiration, more references, which in the end I think is really a lot of what the conductor really brings to an orchestra, is that library of information in a moment and that sense of relationship to other pieces.
Right now you have 3 orchestras under your hand, so to speak. The one in Spain, the Basque National Orchestra in San Sebastian, your principal guest at RAI in Italy in Torino, and your chief in Malmö right now. How is this even doable, and is it reasonable to have 3 orchestras spread all over, not all over the world, but all over Europe?
Yeah, so Malmö has actually changed now, so I'm now artistic consultant with them. So I was their music director, and now now I'm taking a different type of role with them. I love the orchestra, I get along with them very well, but they are an institution that is looking for, they're not sure what they want, and I'm sure what I want and how I would like to go, so they need space to figure that out. But we can still make music together. So I would say technically right now I really have the Basque National Orchestra, which I've been with now for 5 years, and then RAI. And RAI is a kind of a new development. It happened right before, the interest happened before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened and it kind of kept delaying us announcing it. So it's been an interesting thing. And with RAI, I don't have any planning or long-term strategy obligations with that. That's just me going there, making great music with them and having a good relationship with them and taking them on tour and things like that. But as far as having the real responsibility, that's with the Basque National Orchestra. And now, after 5 years, that project is going very well. We've done some good recordings now, and I've hired 20 plus musicians. I have another 6 I'm hiring this year. So it's on its way. And now I'm at a new stage in that orchestra where I'm not taking such a... I think when I came to that orchestra, my goal was to first to get it in good working order and to get the musicians to work better together, to increase its profile there in Spain, to increase its capacity as an instrument, as a group of people, and then to start getting it international attention, and to start changing the traditions in the orchestra. And those things I've achieved with them, and now it's time for me to start pulling back a little bit and allowing them to develop more on their own. So I'm still with them, and I'm still their chief conductor, but I don't do it because I'm a megalomaniac. I do my work because I want, whenever I'm gone from whatever orchestra I'm with, or whatever city I'm in, or from this planet, I would like for people to look back and say, he left this better, he left that better. And maybe people aren't always happy with how I do it. We can always have that discussion. But my goal is that. So if I can leave things in a better condition than what I found them in, that has ramifications beyond my scope. My orchestra works better together. They learn to listen to each other better and work better as an orchestra. That makes them better teachers who are making another generation of musicians listen better, work better. That has a whole, trickle-down effect. And then not only that, but I also, maybe I'm naive, but I slightly believe in the fact that if we learn how to work better together, we actually become better people. And that can have other ramifications in people's lives.
What I find typical in a way, and interesting in any way, was in Malmö you did this Beethoven recording. So you recorded all 9 Beethoven symphonies in 2 weeks, live concerts in 2019, and you could have started easier. I mean, that's A-list material, and that's something you actually would expect, or not expect, but you would, expect to see from a famous conductor after being famous for many years, being with a famous orchestra for many years. Then they are in a position to say, okay, now we're good to go and do all these Beethoven symphonies. And you've gone to Malmö, and that was the first recording project you've done there. And I thought, oh, wow. You always like to take the hard road, don't you? Or is Beethoven maybe not that tricky at all? It's just
freaking hard.
It's just 9 symphonies.
It's hard as hell.
Okay.
So there are 2 points that you bring up on this. So I'll give you the backstory to why that project happened in the first place. The first part of it was when I came to that orchestra as a guest conductor, and I did Mahler 7, and they were interested. They basically asked me pretty quickly if I would be the chief conductor. My answer was, no, because I didn't. It wasn't clear to me what they wanted from me. And we had a lot of discussions, and we continued, and the musicians told me in pretty much these terms: we are a good orchestra, a good collective of musicians, we have a great hall, but we don't have a tradition. And we want to have a tradition. Well, I thought tradition is about consistency, that is about a way, and having a common sort of perspective on something. And I thought, well, that I can help you with. It's not that I am somehow rooted in the greatest tradition of anything. I mean, I don't propose that I have the best Beethoven or the best Ravel or anything. I don't propose any of that. I have a version. I like my version, and I hope other people like it too. But it's going to be different the next time that somebody hears it. So I said, okay, great. I think I can do this. I think I can work with you, and I think we can do this. So the Beethoven, I didn't even realize it was the Beethoven anniversary coming. Beethoven was because with Beethoven, from there I could go up to Brahms, I could go to Schumann, I could go to Schubert, I could go to Mahler, I could go to Strauss, and I could go down to Mozart, I could go down to Haydn. So it was like putting a stake down in the middle of the field. And I said, with Beethoven, we can have some basic understandings that can grow in either direction. So the 9 symphonies, I went over the summer, I rehearsed them for 2.5 weeks. We performed some of the symphonies, and then I went back again, and then we did in the whole cycle. And why the whole cycle in one go? First off, no musician was allowed off from the project. Everybody had to play because everybody needed to be part of the common goal, the common experience. That when we have decided today in the second symphony, the staccato means this, but on the third symphony, the staccato means something else. We all have that shared understanding of it, and there's the basis of the tradition, that they are the ones that carry that on. That then when that orchestra steps on stage again, like this season, they're going to do a Beethoven symphony with a guest conductor. They will step on the stage having an idea of how we play Beethoven. That's tradition. So when you go to the great orchestras, whether it's Berlin Phil or whatever, they step on stage and they say, this is how we sound in this repertoire. Now you, guest conductor or even chief conductor, are welcome to alter it. But we know what we present from the very first moment. So that is what I was trying to do with them.
So didn't anybody tell you, are you out of your mind doing things like this? Or if anybody did tell you this, is this just a situation where you say, thank you very much, now I really want to do it?
No, actually, nobody's told me I was out of my mind, because also it had another objective. Malmö was a kind of a very vibrant city with a lot of different types of people there. It was a very, very eclectic society, but the concert hall prior to my time there was really just for a very specific set of people. And they were selling like 50% of their audiences. And I said, well, the reason for me is that you're not opening your doors wide enough and not and frankly, nowadays people, yeah, okay, you go to just a concert to hear a good concert with a good soloist, good conductor, good orchestra, whatever. But actually what people are really looking for is experiences. I mean, look, we're in the Elbphilharmonie. People are coming into this building just to walk around because they want the experience of being in this building. People are looking for experiences. So I thought in a Beethoven cycle, we offer an intensive experience. We're asking people a big compromise of their time to come and engage with an orchestra. But I also wanted all the marketing material was very edgy. It was all with QR codes and it was all with graffiti on the walls of the city of Beethoven and stuff like that. And yeah, just making it part of the vernacular of the city. And what did I see when I turned around to all of those 9 symphonies being completely sold out? Not because we lowered the price, not because we did anything other than create something quite exciting. I looked around and I saw death metal people standing right next to the 70-year-old Swedish grandmother. And they're all there to hear Beethoven. Because that I believe in. There's nothing that separates those two people. There's a lot less that separates them than is the same about them in my eyes. And so I filled the hall up. I got a lot of enthusiasm, got new people in the hall. I laid some tradition roots down for the orchestra. The recording project came after the fact. Now, when the recording idea came after I had planned this cycle, then I got really, really nervous. Because I thought, well, now that is a different kettle of fish, trying to record a Beethoven cycle when you're 20, 35 or whatever I was when I did it. And actually, the thing that helped me get through it was a chance encounter with Lady Valerie Schulte. And I was a award winner of the Schulte Foundation in Chicago when I was living there, which allowed me some opportunities to go and study and to buy scores and things like that. And I was at the award winners dinner in Chicago, and I met Miss Schulte, and I asked her. She asked, as an award winner, she goes, is there anything I can do for you? And I said, well, actually, there's something very specific I would like to ask you for, if it's possible at all. And she goes, yeah. I go, do you have any scores of Maestro Schulte that I could look at? She goes, actually, back at my hotel, I have his Beethoven 7th Symphony. I said, is there any chance that I could see that before I leave town? She goes, no, just after the dinner, we'll go together. So she was in a nice suite. So I go, and it was where her and Maestro Schulte used to stay when they were always in Chicago with Chicago Symphony. So she takes the score out, this ratty-tatty thing, and puts it down on the counter and says, take your time. So she's going and making other phone calls and such. And it was the first page that meant a lot to me when I opened it. On the left-hand corner, Bayerischen Rundfunk, September blah, blah, blah. Chicago Symphony, October blah, 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 timing, all of these things. all down that list, all the way down the page, all the way through the entire introduction page and on the back page. Then I started looking through it, and I saw all these little red markings, blue markings, and then little tiny pieces of advice. And I asked her about it. I said, why did he always keep track of all these things? And here was the kicker. She said, he understood his work was part of a larger process. That what I do today is the best I can do today, but it is the worst thing I will ever do. That this is only laying the groundwork for the next performance. And that kind of took the shackles off of me. Because as the perfectionist that I am and the person who wants to do the best, that's when I started to understand in my work it's a process. So the Beethoven, what gave me the courage to record it wasn't the idea that I'm going to record the Beethoven cycle. No, it's that I'm going to record my first Beethoven cycle and that it is part of my process. So if I'm so fortunate to be 90 years old like Bernard Haitink and I one day get to have Orchestra X to record it with, this recording will be part of that history. It is the bedrock by which I inform other performances. And what is more interesting is that during the pandemic, we had to come back to some Beethoven symphonies in Malmo. And when we did the performances, so I went through it, and of course everything was fine because the orchestra knew what they were doing. So already the tradition was already kind of starting to take shape. And now doing it a second time, you're reinforcing things. And I said, no, we need to change this here. We need to change that there. You go, no, but last time you said you wanted it like this. I said, yeah, I think that was a mistake. Mm-hmm. It already changed.
Okay.
That's a long story for the Beethoven.
But just some basic stuff I wanted to know. I mean, conducting can be, let's say, 90 people plus one. And on the other hand, it can be 1 against 90. And since I guess I won't be able to end up where you are in your position, in your line of work, how do both extremes feel when it's a close unity, or on the other hand, when you're standing there, there's 90 people in front of you and they're doing something you have no idea of why and how long and how do you get out of the situation? So how do both situations feel for you? I guess being a unit is easier and friendlier and much more admirable. But on the other hand, you must have had situations by now where you stand in front of an orchestra and say to yourself, when does this end? Why am I here?
I've had that happen a few times. Mm-hmm. Generally, what I learned was that usually it had nothing to do with me when we were in that situation. In one case, the orchestra had just voted before the first rehearsal with me that they were going to go on strike after my concert. Not because of me, but because of a union negotiation. So there was something in the air that I couldn't deal with. What I've learned is a lot of times it has very little to do with me, those moments. And sometimes that's just the day. It just ends up like that. Where I find myself having short patience and work with my colleagues is if they're not, it's not unkind, but if they're overtly rude to each other. And if they're rude to me, I can tolerate a certain amount of that, but if they're aggressive towards me, that I won't take. Because, that's just not acceptable.
But on the other hand, what's it like starting to fly? I mean, actually starting to fly. You stand there, you walk there, you stand there on your feet, the music starts, and all of a sudden the ground is leaving your feet somehow, and your feet are leaving the ground.
It doesn't happen like that for
me.
Really? Yeah.
Oh.
No. But I have to say that every working in a relationship, it didn't matter whether it was the orchestra I was chief with or principal guest or just a guest conductor, that for me, there's an ebb and flow in the cycle. There are moments that I feel like, okay, many people are quite upset with me now, but now I can feel another moment that more people are happy with me. But I don't really concern myself whether they're happy with me or they're upset with me. My first job is to make sure the composer is spoken for. Now, I do my work in a respectful, calm way. So I will speak to them with respect and deference, but worrying whether they like me, I don't have any real say on that. That's for them to decide. What I can do is offer what I have. That's either going to be good enough for them or it's not. but I don't have anything to say about that. So if they don't like me, I also maybe I've also can recognize that maybe they don't understand me. And communication, as one good friend of mine said, is everything about what the other person understands, not what you say. So if I think that they don't understand me, then I think that I have not communicated my intentions properly to them. So I have to find another way to do it so that they at least understand what I'm looking for, why I'm asking for this. And I think in the end, when people work with me and they hear the end product, they usually say, okay, this made sense why we went through all of that. And it's not like it's gruesome. It's not like people are, some conductors, they have they say that they're mopping up the blood off the stage after the rehearsal. I'm not one of those. I like to work peacefully if I can. I don't know if I answered your question.
Of course. But I wonder what it's like when you started in this business and being where you are right now. How is your ambition? Has it become worse during the last years because you've seen that you can succeed in doing what you're doing, or is there some idea of, okay, I'm satisfied now, I know what I do, I have 80, 100, 150 scores prepared, everybody can call me and we'll work something out, it's fine? Or is it even worse for you now because you're in this now, and you see even more closely now that there's so much more to learn?
There's so much more to learn. So much. And career. I have a weird way of looking at it. I got asked this question by a journalist once. He said, so what is the orchestra you want to be conducting ultimately? And I thought about it for a bit. And I mean, of course, one always comes up with the very automatic, easy answers, like, Concertgebouw and things like that. But actually, that answer didn't satisfy me when I was thinking of it in my own head. So I'm telling you what I was thinking. What I ended up answering is actually much closer to the real way I feel about the subject. You can have a small orchestra in a tiny village and can play very well. And their scope is very important. I often say to people that the public school string teacher or the high school band director is just as important as me. I am not more important in the musical spectrum at all. The only difference really between us is scope, capacity to be able to influence a change. So they're going to do that with, say, a class of 20 kids. But I'm working with 90 professionals with an institution that has like another 40 administrative officials working. Maybe I'm doing that inside of a city like San Sebastian. Maybe I'm doing that in a city like Malmo, which is a little bit bigger. Or maybe I do it in Torino, which is even twice as big. And maybe the goal is eventually, career-wise, the goal isn't about the orchestra, but it's more about the scope of what I can accomplish. How big is my canvas? So if I have a larger institution at my to work with, then I can influence more things. I can make more changes. I can do more things. I can help more people, have more projects, change the lives of more people. So that's actually how I perceive my career. It's not about the orchestra. It's not about the cachet, but it's rather about the canvas that I'm working with. Does that make any sense?
Sure. What is worse for you, going on a stage or having to leave it?
Going on the stage before the first rehearsal. That's the worst moment for me.
Is this stage fright, or just being afraid to maybe fail, or is it just, what's it like? Why is that the worst?
The first moment of rehearsal is the maximum unknown for me. Unlike a violinist or any other instrumentalist who, let's say, violinists, they open up their case, they have the same violin, they know how it responds more or less, it changes every day, but they have a close relationship with it, very intimate. They're wielding it precisely. It doesn't play without them. I don't have that advantage. I step on the stage, I'm dealing with people who can play without me. Maybe not some of the most complicated pieces in a technical way, but they can play music without me. And each one of those people are different every day.
And you have to make them so that they don't want to play this without you in a second.
I don't know if I would think of it like that so much as I would think of it as when I think I'm being effective, when I can say that I have been effective, it's that moment in which I'm one of them and I'm also not. I'm able to ebb and flow within the orchestra and out of it. That our rehearsal, our work together has imbued them with a sense of what is going to happen and how to do it. And they have that in control. And then they know where their capacity is to take it in a different direction. And then I can come in and support them in that, in a concert. And then also, I can also surprise them with going in another direction or going even more extreme in a direction. But that's me ebbing in and out in the performance. If I have my choice, if things are working well, it's like that. That I really can, I'm with them. I'm not concerned about them being with me. I said this to the orchestra that I'm on tour with right now, Robert Trevino, and in the Mussorgsky Pictures and an exhibition, there's a lot of big solos with the orchestra. And we had one rehearsal, and one of the players was having a difficulty in the solo, and it was needing to take a little bit more time, and the orchestra just kind of left them in the dust. and I stopped, and I said, "Oh, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's not acceptable. No. You can never do that, ever." I said, we can plan on what we need to accomplish and what we want to do, but when one of your colleagues is trying to do something and they can't manage it, or something is going wrong, which can happen to everybody here on the stage, you help them, you save them, you give them what they need, because them succeeding is you succeeding. Nobody gets out of this alone. We do it all together or not at all.
This is a perfect point for me to bring up this quote of you I found, which is, on the one hand, it has been said, obviously after rehearsal with Gewandhaus in Leipzig, and it's totally disarming and totally humbling at the same time. You're said to have said, "Thank you for making me a better conductor today." That's one of the best, maybe even the best thing a conductor can say to an orchestra after a rehearsal, whatever the results. But I found it really charming and really, disarming. Which musician can be mad at you after a sentence like this? It's genius.
It was true, though. It wasn't me trying to make nice with them. It was a really genuine, sincere expression. And when I conduct, I'm remembering exactly the circumstance. It was in the Second Symphony of Schumann. It was the last movement. It was after the Dankgesang returns with the little modification for Clara, and I had a different bowing in there, and they said, "No, can we just do the Schumann bowing?" And it sounded absolutely incredible. And then I heard something. I heard their culture. I experienced their soul in that moment, their collective soul. That they didn't only propose me something different, but then they were able to, without a word amongst themselves, to demonstrate it so concretely. And now that is a sound, that is a color, that is a sentiment, that is a way that is in my toolbox now, that I can now call upon with others. So not only so it didn't just make me better, that now I know how to deal with that passage better, but also now I can go to an orchestra and I could even try to inspire that moment from them. It's true, though. That was a great moment.
Just to wrap things up, where and how will I hear from you in 10 years?
When you want.
That's not the answer I expected. I thought you might say, I'll be chief conductor of Berlin Philharmonic or anything like this. Is there any ambition left for you to fulfill, or what do you think where you're going to be?
Oh, I'm not without my ambition.
Okay.
I want to record Mahler symphonies. I want to tour the world and I want to work with great artists. I'm working next week with Nobuyuki Suji, and that's been a dream of mine for 4 years now. Once I knew who he was and heard about him, I said, I have to work with him. There's tons of artists I want to work with, tons of composers I want to work with, commission. I want to present projects. I had this project in Malmo that was called the Pollination series, and this was the idea that I took the orchestra into all the musicians of the orchestra, separated them off into small chamber groups, sent them to synagogues, churches, old folks' home, kindergartens, cafes all around Skåne, right? As far as you could blow them. And my inspiration was those little weeds that have the little white flowers, and you blow on them to make a wish. I don't know if you do that here in Germany, but as a kid, and then the seeds fly off into the air and go there. You don't know which ones are going to result in the plant, but you have to blow all of them out there. Nevertheless, put them out there and see where something grows. And one of the things that is very essential to my way of working is I very much intend to plant as many trees in my life. And if I don't ever get to enjoy their shade, that's okay. Somebody else can. So if I walk through a door, I keep the door open. I don't mind if the person walks through the door behind me and then surpasses me. It doesn't bother me. I have some young conductors who are wonderful colleagues of mine who are younger than me and who I've helped at different periods of time, and they're doing great. They're having debuts with orchestras that I'm not invited to. I'm not jealous of them. I'm happy for them because that's another good person doing good work, and that's something I helped happen. I'm not taking responsibility for what they're doing. I just know I helped. I didn't harm them. And so like that Pollination series, idea that you do all these concerts and you ask them, then you let the people know what you're doing at the main concert house. You give them the tickets that come there. They stand in a special line. They get a QR code. Then you know that they came from this particular concert venue. The orchestras backstage during the concert are notified that these people from their concert have attended the concert. So at the intermission, they go and they can go and meet them and say, hey, I'm so happy to see you here. It's wonderful. Human contact, human connection. Not just to get more people to buy tickets, not just to get them to fill up the seats, but rather it's because it's the other way around. It's our obligation as artists. It's our obligation as cultural institutions to not say, come to us, we're important. No. You're important and we can be part of your life. So let us show you how that's possible. It's a very different way of looking at it. So, I have lots of ambition. I have lots of things I want to do. I hope that I can, and it's not even just the big things. I remember one time, one really impactful moment in my life. I was doing Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. And the Second Symphony of Rachmaninoff in the same program. I would never program this again, by the way. It's too much Rachmaninoff. But I was doing a pre-concert talk, and I was explaining the pieces and talking about Rachmaninoff's depression and his overcoming it and how and what it meant and why I love this music, because I said that I think in all of us is this ability to overcome. It's kind of a human characteristic. And I had this long speech and played a lot of different excerpts and such. Concert happened, and this woman came backstage, didn't find me, but she found one of the ushers and said, I can't find Mr. Trevino, but could you relay him a message for me? And so the usher knew me and said, yeah, I can do that. Tell her, and it turned out it was a well-known story in the city that this mother, her son had murdered his wife and his 2 kids. He was severely depressed and had a nervous breakdown. It was just a complete tragic story. Nobody wins. Complete horrible thing that happens in life. And this woman had been buried her son, her daughter-in-law, and her 2 grandchildren, and became a recluse and stayed in for over a year and a half or so. And this was her first event out. And then my talk and then the concert. And she said, please just tell Mr. Trevino I have the courage to go on now. So that means a lot to me.
Okay.
How can you can't quantify that.
Yeah.
And you don't, as a musician, as an artist, you never know when you're going to do that with somebody. One person, one child. I was that kid. I was that person. That's what we can do with our art form. We can change people's lives. And it's nothing to do with being on the headline of the post or anything to do with that. Sometimes it's in the smallest actions.
Okay. So you're not only a conductor, you're also a romantic. Thanks very much for the talk.
I am very romantic.
I enjoyed it, and I hope you'll enjoy the concert tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Weitere Podcasts vom Hamburger Abendblatt finden Sie auf abendblatt.de/podcast.